Hello everyone, welcome to the GODAN webinar. On behalf of the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar today. We thank you for all of you for joining from all around the world. Today, our webinar, we are very happy to have this webinar from colleagues from the GODAN Action, who will be talking to us on one of the new geospatial services they have developed to facilitate the publishing of data. And I would like to introduce you to our two speakers from the GODAN Action. Deborah Yates from the Open Data Institute. Deborah has worked on data governance and led culture change through open data in the public sector. She led the program of work at the Environmental Agency to embed open by design into business as usual and worked with information asset owners to understand and improve data management practices across the organization. Deborah's passion for open data stems from her practical experience in applying data policy and seeing the great potential to achieve so much more when data is open. So welcome, Deborah. And we also have Marcelo De Maria, who is a researcher and data analysis at the Land Portal Foundation and has been a consultant for the Italian National Institute of Agriculture Economics. Marcelo is also currently completing his second PhD at the School of Agriculture Policy and Development at the University of Reading. He joined the Land Portal with the belief that improving land governance is one of the main challenges that the world is facing today, and the linked open data technologies and standards can play a major role in creating an accessible and inclusive information ecosystem, improving decisions and policies in the land sector. So we have two excellent speakers, and I'm really looking forward to hear from them on the work that GODAN Action is doing. And I will also request all the participants, if you have any questions, please use the chat window. There is a questions section. You can post your questions through the chat window. And when we finish the presentation, we will make sure the presenters have an opportunity to answer your questions. So thank you for posting the questions through the chat window. We will answer them at the end of the webinar. So I would like to hand over the floor now to Deborah to present.
Thanks, Suji. I'm just going to turn my webcam off while we present, and I'll put it back on for the Q&A later. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to talk to you about the work we've been doing at the GODAN Action Project on the importance of standards for weather, land and nutrition data. So today, in terms of the structure of the presentation, we'll cover some context. So I'll tell you a bit about the project in general, some of the wider work we've been doing, and then I'll go into some of the resources we've produced that will hopefully be useful for you. And I'll hand over to Marcelo towards the end to demonstrate how Land Portal have been using one of the services that we've produced. So the rapidly increasing availability of scientific, social and market data has huge potential to improve the agricultural sector and address food security and nutrition challenges. But to really achieve this potential, we need to ensure that this data can be accessed, shared and used by those that are in a position to realise its benefits. So GODAN Action has been a 3-year project, and it's looking at enabling data users, producers and intermediaries to engage effectively with open data and maximise its potential for impact in agriculture and nutrition sectors. So it's a partnership project, and you can see on the screen the different partners involved. And together we've worked to strengthen capacity, to promote common standards and best practice to improve how we measure impact in open data projects. And we've just started year 3 of the 3-year project. So what is GODAN Action aiming to do? So the effective use of open data is currently obstructed by a number of barriers, such as a lack of infrastructure, inequalities in access, resources and skills, resulting in a digital divide. There's a lack of usable open data tailored to needs of specific stakeholders within sectors, and a lack of awareness that open data even exists. We see a lack of transparency, problems with data privacy, and failing citizen engagement in this area as well. So the aim of GODAN Action is on the screen in front of you. So it's about enabling an effective use of open data in tackling food security and nutrition challenges by building the capacity of stakeholders to understand the potential of open data for agriculture and nutrition, and also to engage with it practically. Or in other words, help solve food security and nutrition challenges using open data. So in terms of what we've looked at specifically, GODAN Action works along three themes to make sure that we're focusing on domains and topics of high relevance, to make sure that we work on the domains where the impact of open data can be substantial, and to put research into practice and achieve impact overall. So the themes that we've looked at are climate and weather data, so thinking about open data as a catalyst for business development and capacity development. The second theme is land data, so to support land data sharing, thinking about localization and contextualization of relevant shared data sets for specific conditions. And finally, nutrition data, considering interoperability for nutrition with respect to the Global Nutrition Report. And we've focused on three linked focal areas aimed at addressing some of the barriers that I just explained. So enhancing data standards and promoting best practice in the management and sharing of data. Identifying tools and methods for assessing the impact of open data in the sector through research. And building the capacity and diversity of open data users, which hopefully will lead to more effective use of the data by those that need it. And it's the work on data standards that we're going to focus on today, and there'll be later webinars on the other topics. So just to back up slightly before we look at what we've done, why have we looked at standards for data and what are they? So standards help different stakeholders to consistently collect and publish data. For example, in this context, could be economic indicators or progress against sustainable development goals. So standards also help data to be correctly interpreted by users so that they can use the data correctly to create useful outcomes. So what are standards? Open standards for data are openly licensed, openly designed standards that help us to publish, access and share and use better quality data. So at any time, we might need to consistently and repeatedly exchange some data, and to do that, we would need to create a standard. So there's three main types of standard. Some help us to share the language and vocabulary. So this is the first type. When we're sharing data, so that we talk about things in consistent ways. So for example, different organisations and countries have their own words and definitions, and we need to standardise these. So for example, it could be a list of countries, it could be types of soil or definitions for climate scenarios. The second type of standard is to help us exchange data. So that could be things like specifying the format that the data comes in. So CSV, JSON, XML. And the final type of standards provide guidance to help us consistently collect and use the data. So it could be best practices or scientific or research protocols. And we can use open standards to help us publish any type of data. So at the ODI, we think of data as being on a spectrum from closed to shared to open, as you can see on the screen. So some data can be openly licensed for anyone to access, use and share. And other data might be more sensitive, so it might contain personal information, and then therefore it should only be shared with certain people, so for example for research. So open standards for data can help us publish across this spectrum, and the licensing of the standard doesn't have to apply to the data set. So just because it could be an open standard, it's help in the exchange of data, it doesn't mean that the data itself has to be openly licensed. For example, in the UK, we've got an open banking initiative, and that defines standards to help publish data about banks, their products, and help connect personal financial information to a range of new products and services. Some of that data is open and some of it's shared, but it's all accessed using common openly licensed standards. So in this context, an example could be the Open Geospatial Consortium. So they're an international not-for-profit organisation, and they are committed to making quality open standards for the global geospatial community, so those that are working on location data. And these standards are made through a consensus process that's freely available for anyone to use and share the world's location data. So that's just a bit of an introduction and a bit of context setting. So what research and tools have we actually been working on over the last couple of years? So we started out by understanding which standards were already in place for weather, land and nutrition, and curating that into one place. So this is the map of standards, and the website is on the screen. So the main purpose of a global map of data standards in a specific field is to promote the discovery and reuse of vocabularies and their properties, classes and controlled values. The reuse of the existing vocabularies is essential to this standardisation, and it promotes greater interoperability between the data sets. Basically, it makes the data easier to use and bring together. And the discovery of existing vocabularies is essential, and it's a prerequisite to this process. So the map of standards that we've produced promotes the wider adoption, standardisation of vocabularies by facilitating their discovery and reuse across a community of practice. And it's aimed to provide a useful overview of what exists and help identify overlaps, duplication and gaps and limits to adoption. The aim being to encourage practitioners not to duplicate efforts and to collaborate both to develop and use these common standards. So in terms of actually using the map, you can browse by theme, so you can look under weather, land, nutrition, or you can search for specific types of data using the search function. And for each standard listed, we've attached an assessment and it can tell you more about it. So it'll include things like whether there's supporting documentation available, what license it's available under, so whether it's open or whether there's more restrictions, whether it's an open standard, whether it's maintained and how usable it is. So for example, is it machine readable? Are there APIs that you can link to? So this could be a good resource if you're looking for standard lists or definitions to bring into the data that you're collecting, using and sharing. And you can also contribute to the map as well. We want it to be a community-driven service, so you can add standards that aren't yet in the map. You can claim a standard and improve the description, or you can link to a vocabulary that you already manage on your own website. So we also carried out a number of research activities after looking at what the landscape was out there to explore the standards landscape for weather, land and nutrition further. So we undertook a gap analysis of the availability and usability of data standards for food and agriculture, and then made recommendations to address those gaps. So all the reports are available on the GODAN website, the address on screen, and there's separate ones. There's a general overview, one for weather, and then one for land and nutrition together for both the gaps and the recommendations. So the detailed findings are in there, but I'll give you a quick summary of the key things that we found. So the main findings from the gap reports are that many standards aren't usable because they're not actually available online on the web. Less than half the standards we looked at were not in machine readable formats. Licensing isn't clear in the bulk of cases, so it's really hard to understand what you can and can't use that data for. And very few standards had documentation to give the user more information about them. And then less than half of them were supported, so for things like queries or updates. So these findings tell us that it can be difficult to find the right standard, and if you can, it can be difficult to use it. So in terms of how to address those gaps, we've identified a few areas to improve the discoverability and usability, and we've made some practical suggestions in the research reports. So they're around improving the documentation and description of the data sources, in particular creating developer documentation and investing and publishing relevant vocabularies. So it could be sustainable indicators, geographic regions, country names, age groups. We made a recommendation to attempt to address discovery issues related to weather, land and nutrition data. So that's more about using metadata standards to help catalogue and describe the data by existing organisations, as well as harmonising or developing new standards. We made a recommendation around working with data publishers to harmonise and publish open standards in a variety of formats so that different user communities, so developers, statisticians, analysts and geospatial specialists can consume and use the data in an efficient way. And the final one was around exploring options to build a community of practice around weather and agricultural data. And so the penultimate thing I'll talk to you about is the help desk. So to support the recommendation for this community of practice for weather and agricultural data, we set up a community-led question and answering service. And the help desk aims to support data publishers and data users in their existing standards for the exchange of data across food, agriculture and nutrition challenges. So we think the types of end user that might benefit from this Q&A service are data publishers, so those that want to be able to identify relevant standards and how to apply them to support publication of their data. Data consumers, so those that want to be able to understand how to consume data that's been published according to a standard. And the authors of data standards themselves, so those that want to connect with communities that publish and consume data using their standards in order to support them in using that. So the help desk is facilitated by the Food and Agriculture Organisation, the FAO, and users can post a question. You can link it to a standard, so you can link to the map of standards if it's a particular query about one of those. Other members can post answers to the question, and there's an option to vote for the best answers with the like button. Okay, and the final output from our work on standards in this area has been to develop a georeferencing service. So much of the weather, land and nutrition data is about a location. So we looked at how to more consistently reference this across the data. So the aim of the service is to support data publishers or researchers in publishing data about locations using standard geospatial identifiers and standard geospatial formats. Essentially, it helps us publish data about location in a consistent way and allows some of that information to be linked together. So Agrano developed the service and it's available on their website, the address on the screen. And as a user, you should be able to upload your data set in the form of a spreadsheet, and then you can later process, validate and enrich it with geospatial information. All the processing remains on your side, on the user side, so there's no sensitive data being transferred across to any other servers. And we're very much learning as we go with this one. We've piloted the service and we've made a few improvements based on the learning from those pilots. We're currently testing it with nutrition data with the Hunger and Nutrition Commitment Index, HANSI, and we've already tested it with the land portal for land data. So I'll hand you over to Marcelo now, who will be able to share his experience with you for land data and see how it could be of use to you.
Yeah, so thanks, Deb, and thanks a lot to the organizer for inviting us. As the land portal, we contributed to the GODAN Action work, especially for the stream of work on open land data. Today, I'd like to introduce a little bit what is that the land portal is doing. And then I'll explain, I'll try to give an idea of why standards and metadata are very important for us in our everyday work and how we have benefited from the GODAN Action Geospatial service in our everyday work, how this service has made, in a way, our life a little bit easier. So first of all, the land portal, what we do, we work to build a information ecosystem for land governance. And the idea is that better information supports better decisions and better policies. Now, why the analogy with the ecosystem? So I think information, just like natural ecosystems, are complex. So more or less, you can think of an analogy with the idea of biodiversity. There are many species in one ecosystem, and in the same way, there are many information types, many themes that are contributing to compose the landscape of information. And at the same time, information, just like a natural ecosystem, is a dynamic system, is constantly evolving. So it is very important to be up to date with the information in a very rigorous way at the same time. And through the Land portal, we are trying to tackle one of the problems that people working in the global LED sector is facing in terms of the fragmentation of the information. So often the information is there, but it's just, you know, hidden in some dark web corners, or it's hard to find, or I need to put together different pieces of information, and this is not often a easy task to do. So we try to build a viable and inclusive information ecosystem for land governance at the Land portal. Now I think we can go to the next slide. And I think another important element about the ecosystem, something that we realize at the Land portal over time, is that each one of us is part of the information ecosystem, and each one of us can influence, for good or for bad, the information ecosystem, and ultimately the quality of decision and policies that are taken in the land sector, with very tangible consequences on real people all over the globe. So I think the Land portal is not just trying to put together information in a meaningful way, but it's also trying to give you a place where you can be actively engaged with the information ecosystem in the land sector. So each one of us in our everyday work can contribute to the information available, can improve the quality of the information by correcting typos, mistakes, by validating information, by using and sharing information possibly responsibly. And yeah, I mean, in a way, I mean, I think the Land portal is a very vibrant community that brings together a very diverse range of stakeholders and let them discuss about land-related issues, land-related data, and so on. But at the same time, even if you don't want to engage with the Land portal, I think it's very important to say that you can engage with your own community, with your own company, with your own organization, and realize that you are an active player of the information ecosystem, and that your decisions, your everyday work, your ideas often can have an impact on this ecosystem. I think we can go to the next slide now. Now, at the Land portal, what is that we do with data? I like to say that the Land portal is much more than a simple, which is not simple at all, data aggregator. One of the things that we do is we constantly look for otherwise fragmented data and information. Land data are typically produced by a variety of stakeholders, organizations. It could be international organizations like the well-known World Bank or FAO. It could be national statistical offices, cadastral offices. It could be civil societies organization that are producing data at a very local level, and so on. So there's a variety of information out there, but often it's not easy to find where this information is, where this information come from, and so on. So we try to aggregate and make visible this information, and we try to do it in a responsible way. So there are several ways in which someone can make the information openly and the data open access. But I think the use of standards and metadata, it's one of the ways that contributes to a responsible use of data. At the land portal, we also contribute directly to standards for land governance. I'd like to mention the work we are doing with LandVoc, which is a thesaurus of terms that somehow brings together the variety of terms and and words that we use every day in the land sector, from a vocabulary that is more a agribusiness or investment vocabulary in the private sector, to a vocabulary that has more to deal with policy interventions, to a vocabulary that is related to the everyday activity of a farmer, of a small scale landholder, and so on. So the Landbook is a controlled thesaurus that should help you organize different themes within the land sector, which is a very complex one. I think we try to contribute to the overall quality of the data ecosystem for the land sector. So we aggregate, we do not produce data in the first place, but we aggregate data from a variety of different sources. And of course, in doing that, we also have what we like to call a human layer in the data sharing process that often is very mechanized, is some automatic process done from a machine to another machine. But yeah, we like to have a human layer if you want, and we double check the quality of the data we are dealing with. So we check for potential entry errors, outliers, and if we found something that is not clear, we get back to the original data provider and we try to find a solution. We try to explain why is that, if that was a mistake, if we need to correct it, and how. So there's an active role that we play every day in improving the quality of data that are out there. We, as I said, we make the data discoverable and accessible, but also we'd like to think about data as something that goes a little bit beyond cold facts and figures. And we try to contextualize the data with other content types. We also have library resources, publications, news items, events, and many other content types that we host on the land portal. And we aggregate them together with data because if we strongly believe that if we do not understand the context behind data and indicator, we are probably missing a huge part of the story. And also, last but not least, we'd like to actively discuss the data with our community. One of the tools that we have on the land portal and we are very proud of is called online discussions. We organize online discussion, webinars, and so on. And in many cases, we had this discussion tackling specifically land-related data issues, such as where are land data in the SDG process, do we have indicators for land tenure security, and so on. And we proudly tackle these issues with a variety of partners working every day in the sector. And then I think we can move to the next slide. So why standards and metadata? I mean, when I started with the LAN portal, I asked myself these questions: why standards and metadata are so important? And I think that standards and metadata, to be honest, are probably one of the least sexy and intriguing thing that I can think of. So why are they so important? So in our own experience, they are very important for two main reasons. The first reason is that using standards and metadata can really contribute to the responsible use of data. We are living the exciting time of the big data revolution, which comes with a lot of opportunities, but at the same time with a lot of challenges. I mean, I can mention the Cambridge Analytica thing just to give you an idea of how data comes also with an ethics there. So metadata and standards typically helps us in understanding who produced the data, what this indicator is about. This is crucial if we want to understand what a specific figure is about, if we want to contextualize it, if we want to understand what was the methodology, and so on. And the second thing is that data information in the land sector are fragmented. This is true, but it is also true that there is really a lot of information out there. So sometimes we can really get lost among the information. And unfortunately, there is a paradox where too much information, it is like having no information at all. So there is some order that we need to put when presenting this information to final users. And basically standards and metadata are really helping us to make this order, to make this wealth of information easily discoverable, and to help a variety of users, orientating within the maze of information in which otherwise they might get lost. So I think we can move to the next slide. I'd like to give you a couple of very simple but practical examples of how we are using the GODAN Action Geodata service in our work, and how this is basically making our life easier. So, sorry, I'm going to discuss couple of examples. The first one is related to ISO 3 codes of countries. The second one is related to the validation of location that goes below national boundaries. We can move to the next slide, thanks. Why country names are a puzzle? So at the moment, our data infrastructure allows us to ingest a variety of data from several data providers, and we somehow needed a common denominator in order not to get lost, as I said before, within the data. And we decided that we were gonna put together and host information at the country level. So all data and indicators that we currently host on the land portal and share and make available through link open data are somehow presented at the country level. Yet, what might seem trivial is not trivial at all, because we have a variety of different ways in which we can call the very same country. So we can call a country in different ways, whether we are using a different language. Think about Ivory Coast and Cote d'Ivoire. for instance. We can use what some people refers to as to the common country name or the formal one, which sometimes are not the same. So how do we avoid to make confusion, and how do we safely match each observation univocally with a given country? So basically, we use ISO 3 codes, which are a unique 3-letter code identifiers for countries. But even using ISO 3 codes, sometimes there are problems. And I think we can move to the next slide. So, for instance, one of the data set that we host, one of the indicators that we host is taken from the World Bank, and it is a data set, an indicator that measures the share of the GDP produced by natural resource rent. Okay, which of course it includes also forestry and other very relevant land-related issues. So the first time we were starting the ingestion of this data, we realized that the World Bank provide information and data series for Kosovo as well. Now, the problem is that officially, for instance, if you go on the UN Stat official website that lists the ISO 3 codes for countries, there is no ISO 3 code for Kosovo. And yet, there is a wealth of land-related information that are out there for Kosovo, produced by reliable and well-known organization. I'm mentioning the World Bank, but there are other informations there. So we basically use the service. Here you can see a snapshot of the validation process that this service provides, where we validated the country name Kosovo against its ISO 3 code. So there is an official list of ISO 3 codes, but there is also I'd say an unofficial list of ISO 3 codes that are commonly used and still do exactly the same jobs of the official ones. So they help us matching a given indicator or data with the right country it refers to. I guess, I mean, we are not in the position to say as a land portal, or me as a researcher, to say whether Kosovo geopolitically really exists. But for sure, we know that there are data and information that are relevant for land-related issues in Kosovo. And as far as we can provide this information univocally and without confusion, then I think we are making a service and we are contributing to a better information ecosystem. Then the next example is there's a little bit of spoiler alert that I need to make. So the land portal is going spatial. We are working really hard to go below national boundaries, and we are developing our spatial platform. So in this process, we started to look at some of the data that we currently host on the land portal. Again, we do not produce data in the first place, but we bring together a variety of useful land-related data from different data providers. We started to include part of the information that in the past we used to exclude from our data infrastructure, so all the information that goes below the national level. Now, the thing is, in some cases, you might find data sets that are structured and organized as geospatial data set, but in some other cases, you might find data sets that are not structured as geospatial data set, explicitly, and yet there is a part of the information that is geographical, spatial, and typically it's very relevant. So the case that I'm going to mention here on the next slide is the Land Matrix, one of the partners we work with. So now, if you go on the Land Matrix website and you download the data, you will see that there is a column called location. Now, the column that is called location contains the best possible guess, let's say, depending on the information that the land matrix has, about the location of a specific large-scale land acquisition. Now, in some cases, the location could be a specific town. In some cases, the location is as accurate as a region. So we only know that a deal is being negotiated in a specific region. In some cases, is the general country. So in this location column, basically, we have geographical information that is extremely important, because knowing where a specific deal is actually happening is extremely important, you know. And through the GODAN Action Geospatial service, we were able to validate the location names that we find on the original data file that you can download as well from the land matrix, is open access, against geonames. So against a structured system, an organized system of geographical location. And on the one hand, basically, this is time saving. The service is time saving because you can basically validate a lot of data with a machine without the need to go on each record one by one. And so basically, for instance, I highlighted in red one record that was problematic. So this is a specific location in Cambodia. At least we know it is somewhere in Cambodia, but we weren't able to locate it with geonames. So in that case, we realized, for instance, that there are actually two city names in the same field. But the service is giving us, in a very fast and quick way, an idea of what are the problematic entries. And those are highlighted in red, and they are highlighted as not valid. But also the service is very useful also in terms of giving us more information even when we match a specific location. So we know that that location has been matched against geonames, but maybe we want to know, I made the example of a specific place in Cambodia I wasn't particularly familiar with. And thanks to geonames, you can click on the link that the service gives to you and not next to the observation that you are looking at, and you can clearly see that this is a second order administrative division in Cambodia. So again, I think we can move to the next and last slide I prepared. I just wanted to give you an idea of how we are using this service, but there is much more that you can do with this service. You can generate location boundaries, you can visualize locations on a map, you can validate locations against geonames and other taxonomies such as ISO 3 codes for countries. And you can convert the data in geospatial formats, in structured geospatial formats. So there is really a lot of things that you can do with the service. I just wanted to give you an idea of how this service is making our everyday life a little bit less painful, because there is a lot of work that we do in the back end of the land portal that is not shown to user, and much of this work is to be sure that the data is presented according to standards and with accurate metadata. And this service is, of course, helping us doing our job quickly and more accurately. But yeah, I think this is just an example of how the service can be used. And of course, there is a variety of other things that you can do. And yeah, I would recommend trying yourself the service and let us know if you have any feedback to improve it and so on. And thank you so much. I'll give you the floor back to Deb for conclusions now.
Thanks, Marcelo. So really all that's left to say is hopefully you found that interesting and would really like you to benefit from some of these tools and resources and the research that we've done and to build on it. So in terms of what's next, it's over to you. Please do access and try the tools. If you need any help in using them, please let us know and we will do our best to support you. And also if there's any way we can make them better, then please do let us know as well. So I guess, Suchith, it's over to you to see if there's any questions. And on this slide are all the links that you'll need in order to access the tools we've talked about today.
Thank you very much, Deborah and Marcelo. Very informative presentation and a lot of information and ideas you presented. So there is a lot of questions coming in. So let me go to the questions one by one so you can answer them as we go. So first question is from Lisette May, who is asking, how can I integrate LandVoc into my website? Marcelo, can you,
yeah, sorry, I was muted. I would strongly recommend to visit the web portal website. There is a section dedicated to LandVoc. So you can have an idea of which terms are covered, what is the definition of each terms, and how they are kind of organized within the maze of relevant land issues that we find out there. And the second thing is, I'd say, if something is not clear, just get in touch with us at the Land Portal. We are a small team, but I'm very lucky and I'm working with wonderful colleagues that will be much more than happy to help you and guide you through the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcelo. Anything to add, Deborah, from your end on that?
No, nothing to add. That was very much Marcelo's question.
So the next question is again from Lisette May, who is asking, what is a basic step I can take to add a control vocabulary to my website?
Well, first of all, I'd say the decision of which vocabulary specifically you want to add, it's somehow topic specific and data specific, okay? So I would start by looking around at the existing standards and vocabularies that are out there. I think with the Land Portal, one of the wonderful things that we realize is that often you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And joining forces with existing initiatives, it's something that, you know, can complement and increase the quality of standards and vocabulary. In the LandVoc case, we joined forces with AgroVoc, which is a well-known control thesaurus that is used by promoted by FAO and used in the agro in the agricultural field. And of course, you know, there are so many intersections between land-related issues and agricultural related issues. So again, I'd start with a very nice search of what is out there, and I will try to get in touch with existing initiatives. I mean, for spatial data, that mentioned the Open Geospatial Consortium. With most of these initiatives, you can really engage and participate and get in touch and have your say. So I guess, yeah, the very important thing probably is switch from, you know, a passive use of information to an active one, to realize that we can really influence the information ecosystem, and we can really contribute to a better information ecosystem in this sense.
Thank you, Marcelo. Anything you want to add, Deborah, for that question? Okay, thank you. So I have one question, because you mentioned the three themes, the nutrition, climate, and land. So from your experience so far, and I also because I'm very interested in the capacity development activities. So which one of those you found had more challenging for getting more participation and getting your outreach activities? Any ideas or any thoughts you want to share?
So it was before my time on the project, but I understand that the weather theme, the climate data, and engaging that community was a big challenge. So yeah, gathering that information and finding that out was definitely more difficult than expected. So there's obviously a lot of progress to make in that area.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I can add something, I think this is in line with the paradox that I mentioned. So sometimes you have situations where too much information is like having no information at all, especially when this information is not organized. So now for weather and climate change, there is a wealth of information out there. And I think like in human history, we never had such an accurate information out there. But at the same time, there are various communities developing different type of data with different type of standards. And sometimes it's like if you are entering in a bubble tower, where everyone is speaking a different language, and even if you are doing something very similar, you do not understand each other. But just to finish, I think the three teams, I wasn't always directly involved in all of them, but I think they all presented different challenges in a way, and specific challenges, team-specific challenges in a way. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's really interesting insights you provided. So there's another question from Lisette May, who is asking, how does the web service for standards work to identify the country and locations? Does it have multilingual support? Does it recognize typos, and is it able to correct those?
Not sure 100% if the service now supports multilingual vocabularies. It is working in English, and I know for sure that GeoNames contains information based on different vocabularies and different languages. So you can, of course, refer to the very same location and using different words depending on the language you are using. So in theory, GeoNames is able to solve this kind of problems. So to detect different entry names, for instance, inputted there by using a different language, for instance. But I guess this is a very good question that we might want to ask to our agrono colleague and double check whether the service is currently equipped for that.
Thank you, Marcel. Anything to add from your end, Deborah, on that?
No, just I've written it down, and we'll come back.
Thank you. So another question I have is, the geospatial service you presented, and you mentioned about the help desk. So what was, do you have any indication of the uptake of that service from the community? Was it, did you have some good response to that help desk offered?
So the help desk hasn't been used as much as we would have liked, but I think a lot of that is down to people not being aware that it's there. So the third year of the project now, we're moving to focus on encouraging uptake of the different resources that we've produced. So webinar is part of raising awareness that those services are there, and hopefully that technical community can start to support each other. So yeah, there'll be a number of activities over the course of this year to try and let people know that it's there and encourage engagement.
Great. Okay, I think that will be a really useful service, and hopefully as you said, through wide outreach and people knowing about it, then you will have a lot more kind of interest for that kind of more people contacting you. And again, coming back to the capacity development, you mentioned the weather. You had some issues with getting the initial kind of feedbacks for the capacity development. So was it for example, were there like any regional differences you faced? For example, if you because most of my kind of work in capacity development, we work a lot in Africa and Asia. So were you able to reach out to communities in those regions as well?
In terms of the capacity development, I think I'd have to move that question to Chipo, who's facilitating behind the scenes as the lead on that work package. But yeah, if Chipo's not able to come in now, then maybe we can send the answer around to that one.
Sure, because I'm in contact with Chipo, so I know. So, but I was just trying to get any other insights you have on that aspect. So, any training programs, because I know there is a lot of training programs and activities the GODAN Action is doing, which I think is just really fantastic, and hopefully, more people will become aware of these resources and tools and resources as well.
Yeah, we've done lots of online training, and all of that material is available online, I think, through the GODAN Action website as well. Yes. So yeah, for people that missed it the first time round, I think you can go in and you can have a look at those resources yourself as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this is a very important aspect, the engagement aspect. I tried to make it clear with a couple of slides over the presentation, because realizing that we are all part of a viable information ecosystem, it is a very important but also a very difficult step to do. And I think with GODAN, but also with our everyday experience at the Land Portal, I think the community engagement is one of the aspects that is more challenging. So sometimes it's a matter of realizing that you are talking to different users group and understanding, different features and characteristics and interests of different users. I don't know, just to make a very simple example, at the Land Portal, we do have a lot of traffic coming from developing countries, from the global south. And typically, we realize that traffic coming from those countries is mainly traffic coming from mobile devices, whilst traffic coming from Western countries, the global north, is typically coming from a desktop, laptop-based device. And of course, there is a different accessibility, and there is different features that you have to have in mind when, the same platform is accessed via mobile or via a desktop. So I guess understanding what are the users is a very first useful step in terms of understanding what are then the best ways to engage them. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcelo. You really covered the point in a very, very good way. And I think, as you rightly pointed out, there is wide variety of users from, different backgrounds. And again, in the developing world, again, especially a lot of the work we are doing is on not only the, some of the people are illiterate, so like voice-enabled things, and so many different aspects we need to think and take into consideration when we try to reach out to so many different communities. So it's very important kind of activity. And I found GODAN Action as a really amazing community, which really helped us in the capacity development activities. So especially the programs you have been developing on e-learning, it has been really useful to have like the train for trainer programs in the global south. And I really hope that will help reach out the importance of open data in agriculture to a more wider cross-section of users and practitioners in the global south as well. So I would like to, because we are now reaching our 1 hour time limit, I want to thank you both for your very informative presentation, and I want to thank all the participants and CTA for especially Chipo and Chris Addison, Chipo Messingini and Chris Addison for all the work done for hosting the webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Bye.